She smiled while handing me the envelope, the kind of smile that tells you something is very wrong. Inside were my tax documents, neatly highlighted, annotated, and corrected by the HOA's most infamous Karen. Yes, she did my taxes, without permission. And that single overstepping move set off a chain reaction that ended with me running the HOA's money. Stay till the end, because this is how harassment turned into a hostile takeover. It started in early spring when our HOA announced a routine audit. I wasn't worried. My finances were clean, my dues paid, my life boring. But Karen, the self-appointed queen of compliance, saw an opportunity. She knocked on doors with a clipboard, sniffing out violations like a bloodhound. Trash cans too visible, curtains the wrong shade, and, apparently, neighbors who might be misreporting something. One afternoon, I found her standing on my porch, holding a folder with my name on it. She claimed the HOA needed to help residents with tax compliance because, in her words, people like me couldn't be trusted to do it right. Before I could respond, she launched into a lecture about deductions, income categories, and how she'd already fixed a few things to protect the community. I was stunned, angry, and very aware that she had crossed a serious line. I told her she had no right to touch my financial information. She smiled again and said, "If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be upset." That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Instead of exploding, I started listening. I let her talk. I asked questions. I watched how she bragged about knowing the HOA's finances better than the board itself. How she complained about incompetent treasurers and missing funds. And that's when a different emotion replaced my anger. Curiosity. That night, I requested the HOA's public financial reports. What I found was sloppy bookkeeping, unchecked authority, and a board asleep at the wheel. Karen wasn't the problem. She was the symptom. So I made a decision. If someone was going to weaponize numbers against me, I'd learn every number better than they ever could. I didn't know it yet, but this was the first step toward becoming the HOA board treasurer. I didn't announce my plan or threaten retaliation. I quietly studied bylaws, attended meetings, and learned who really pulled strings. Every spreadsheet told a story. Every signature revealed trust misplaced. While Karen obsessed over policing neighbors, I prepared for accountability. This wasn't revenge fueled by ego. It was strategy, patience, and a lesson in power. The calmest person often ends up holding the keys. And this chapter is only the beginning of what came next for everyone. The next few weeks were quiet on the surface, but underneath, everything was shifting. I became a regular face at HOA meetings, always sitting in the back, always silent, always taking notes. Karen noticed, of course. She thrived on attention, and my refusal to engage made her uneasy. She'd throw comments into meetings, hoping to bait me. I responded with polite nods and nothing more. That restraint frustrated her more than any argument ever could. Behind the scenes, I was learning. I read the bylaws line by line, discovering rules even the board members didn't seem to understand. Financial oversight was supposed to rotate. Audits were required annually. Expense approvals needed multiple signatures. None of that was happening. The HOA had been running on autopilot, trusting whoever volunteered, which usually meant whoever craved power the most. I started asking harmless questions. Not accusations, just curiosity. Why hadn't last year's audit been shared with residents? Why were landscaping costs increasing while services decreased? Why did Karen, who held no official financial role, have access to sensitive documents? Each question landed softly, but together they made the room uncomfortable. The board president brushed things off at first. He joked about paperwork and thanked Karen for helping. But other residents were listening. After meetings, people pulled me aside, whispering their own stories, fines that made no sense, letters that felt threatening, rules enforced selectively. A pattern was forming, and Karen was always in the middle of it. Then came the budget meeting. Karen arrived with charts she had prepared herself, confidently explaining numbers that didn't match the official reports. I watched board members nod along, clearly confused but unwilling to challenge her. When she finished, I raised my hand. Calmly, respectfully, I pointed out 3 discrepancies and cited the exact pages from the financial statements. The room went silent. Karen laughed it off, but her face tightened. She accused me of nitpicking and wasting time. I replied with a single sentence, "If these numbers are wrong, we should fix them before approving anything." That was it. No insults, no drama, just accountability. For the first time, the board postponed a vote. Residents clapped. Karen stormed out early. That night, an email went out, announcing the formation of a finance review committee. I was invited to join. Karen wasn't. This wasn't a victory yet, but it was momentum. The kind that shifts power slowly, then all at once. And Karen could feel it slipping away. I went to sleep knowing the board had finally noticed. The residents had found a voice, and Karen had lost control of the narrative. Power doesn't vanish loudly. It erodes quietly, one exposed spreadsheet, one unanswered question at a time under bright lights. By the time the Finance Review Committee held its first meeting, the atmosphere in the neighborhood had changed. Conversations stopped when Karen walked by. Emails suddenly included more people. Transparency, once a boring concept, had become a shared curiosity. I sat at the long folding table with 3 board members and 2 residents, stacks of documents spread out like evidence in a trial. Karen wasn't there, but her fingerprints were on everything. Started with bank statements, missing memos, inconsistent balances, expenses rounded in ways that made no accounting sense. Nothing screamed crime, but everything whispered negligence. The longer we looked, the clearer it became that no one had truly been watching the money. Karen had filled that vacuum with confidence, not competence. She spoke fluently, so people assumed she was right. As treasurer duties were discussed, the board admitted something shocking. The current treasurer wanted out, burned out, overwhelmed, and tired of being second-guessed by someone who didn't even hold the position. That someone, of course, was Karen. The room grew quiet as eyes slowly turned toward me. I hadn't asked for anything. I hadn't volunteered. But I had done the work. Karen found out 2 days later. She cornered me near the mailboxes, her voice low and sharp. She accused me of manipulation, of turning neighbors against her, of trying to steal authority that people like me didn't deserve. I didn't argue. I simply told her that positions were elected, not seized, and that transparency wasn't a threat unless you feared it. The election was scheduled quickly. Karen campaigned aggressively, reminding everyone how much time she had donated to the HOA. I campaigned quietly, sharing facts, offering open books, and promising one thing only: clarity. On voting night, the margin wasn't close. The Room didn't cheer. It exhaled. Becoming treasurer didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. The first thing I did was commission a full audit. The second was lock down access to financial records. The third was publish monthly reports anyone could read. Karen sent emails, long ones. None were answered. Weeks later, she resigned from every committee. Not loudly, not publicly, just gone. The HOA didn't collapse. It didn't spiral. It functioned better than it ever had. And the woman who once did my taxes without permission, she couldn't even access the budget anymore. Funny how power works. The moment you stop chasing it, it has a way of landing in your hands. Once I settled into the treasurer role, the real work began. Not the spreadsheets or budgets, but rebuilding trust. Residents had grown used to confusion, sudden fines, and vague explanations. I wanted the opposite. Every dollar now had a story, and every story was documented. Monthly reports went out on time, written in plain language, not accounting jargon. For the first time, people actually read them. The board meetings changed tone fast. Questions were no longer met with defensiveness. When someone disagreed, we checked the numbers together. Transparency turned arguments into conversations. Ironically, the more open we became, the less drama we had. Power thrives in darkness, but order thrives in light. Karen, meanwhile, didn't disappear quietly in spirit. She lingered online, posting long comments in neighborhood groups, hinting at corruption without evidence. She warned people that audits were cover stories and that I was hiding something. The difference now was simple. Facts existed. Anyone could verify anything she claimed. Slowly, her posts stopped getting replies. One afternoon, I received a formal request. Karen wanted copies of HOA financial records for personal review. I replied with the policy she herself once cited against others. Access was limited. Requests required justification. Reviews happened in meetings, not kitchens or porches. Her response was immediate and furious. But rules don't bend to volume. That moment taught me something important. Karen never cared about the HOA's health. She cared about proximity to power. When she lost that access, she lost interest. Control was her currency, not community. The biggest test came during budget season. A major repair was needed, expensive and unavoidable. In the past, this would have sparked panic and finger-pointing. Instead, we laid out options, costs, and timelines. Residents voted with full information. The decision passed. No threats, no accusations, just collective responsibility. After the meeting, an older neighbor pulled me aside. She said she'd lived there 15 years and had never once felt heard until now. That comment meant more than any title. I realized the story was never about revenge. It was about replacing fear with structure. Karen eventually sold her house. No farewell post, no dramatic exit, just a for sale sign and silence. Some people asked if I felt satisfied. I didn't. I felt resolved. The system worked because someone finally respected it. The HOA didn't need a hero. It needed accountability. And all it took to dismantle a tyrant was patience, paperwork, and the courage to stay calm when provoked. The funny thing is, once the chaos ended, life became almost boring. Meetings ran on time. Budgets balanced. Complaints dropped. And that's when I understood the real ending of this story. Karen didn't lose because she was exposed or embarrassed. She lost because the environment she fed on no longer existed. As treasurer, I stayed intentionally unremarkable. No power plays, no favoritism, just process. Systems don't care about personalities, and that was the lesson no one had ever taught our HOA. Rules weren't weapons anymore, they were guardrails. When someone disagreed, we documented it. When mistakes happened, we corrected them publicly. Fear had no place to hide. Months later, a new homeowner asked me something unexpected. He said, "Why does everyone trust the board here?" I paused before answering because trust wasn't something we advertised. It was something we practiced. Quietly, consistently. And that consistency made control seekers irrelevant. I thought back to the moment Karen handed me my own tax papers, smiling like she'd won. At the time, it felt invasive, humiliating, infuriating. Now it felt small. That single overreach forced me to pay attention, to learn, to step into responsibility I never planned to take. She tried to dominate me, and instead she activated me. There's a strange irony in that. People who abuse power often create the very leaders who replace them. Not out of ambition, but necessity. I never wanted authority. I wanted peace. And peace required structure. Even now, when new volunteers join, I tell them one thing. Titles don't make you important. Transparency does. The moment you start guarding information instead of sharing it, you've already lost your way. That principle has kept our HOA stable longer than any personality ever could. Sometimes neighbors joke about the story. "Remember when she did your taxes?" they say, laughing. I smile too because it sounds ridiculous now. But the truth behind it matters. Boundaries matter. Systems matter. And calm, informed resistance always outlasts loud control. So, if you ever find yourself dealing with someone like that, remember this. You don't have to fight them at their volume. You just have to outlast them with facts, patience, and consistency. Power doesn't always fall. Sometimes it simply gets reassigned. And that's how an HOA Karen crossed one line too many, and accidentally turned me into the board treasurer. Want to start a new story, or should we break this one down for a thumbnail, title variation, or description next?